We begin with a Fox News alert as President Trump is gearing up for yet another eventful night. Heading to Phoenix shortly, he will be holding a campaign-style rally there. Good morning. Welcome to Happening Now. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Melissa Francis. The president's rally comes on the day after his primetime address to the nation, outlining a new strategy in Afghanistan, one the president says was deliberately light on details to give the military more flexibility. He also reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to the Afghan government, but said American support should not be taken for granted.
However, our commitment is not unlimited, and our support is not a blank check. But one way or another, these problems will be solved. I'm a problem solver. And in the end, we will win.
We have Fox team coverage with John Roberts on the latest developments out of the White House. First, though, let's go to national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin, who is live at the Pentagon. Jennifer.
John, U.S. military officials tell me there are two aspects of the president's strategy that are new. There will be no timetable for withdrawal, and U.S. troops will have restrictions removed about how far down they can embed to call in airstrikes. It's not dramatically different from what presidents have tried in the past. The difference is emphasis. President Trump is going to try to hold Pakistan and India accountable and in the use of safe havens in Pakistan. But remember, the CIA carried out more than 400 drone strikes on the border and inside Pakistan from 2004 to 2014, killing up to 3,900 people. So it's not as though this hasn't been tried before, and money has been withheld from Pakistan in the past. It's not clear what new leverage the president has on nuclear-armed Pakistan. What is clear is Trump's military advisors convinced him that the U.S. had to stay in Afghanistan.
The consequences of a rapid exit are both predictable and unacceptable. A hasty withdrawal would create a vacuum that terrorists, including ISIS and Al-Qaeda, would instantly fill, just as happened before September 11th.
Defense Secretary Mattis just landed in Iraq, where he was asked about the president's strategy. He would not talk troop numbers. In fact, the president was clear last night that he would not be talking troop numbers either. Defense officials I talked to agree there is no winning in Afghanistan, but there is a way to lose, and the president chose not to lose, they say. He took their advice to stay engaged and not withdraw. John?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. So President Trump is getting ready to fly across country for a campaign-style rally in Phoenix this evening. We expect he will touch on several hot-button issues.
Yeah, without question. The president could get into building the wall along the Mexico border. He could weigh in on Arizona's Senate race. And Republican incumbent Jeff Flake, who he has criticized as, quote, weak and toxic just last week. Let's bring in Chief White House correspondent John Roberts. John, a lot of fertile ground here. What do you think is going to happen?
Melissa, good morning. I think all of the above is probably the way we'll go tonight. The president leaving for Arizona in the next 45 minutes or so. It's expected that he's going to have a very friendly crowd inside the convention center, a place where he has spoken a couple of times before. I was there for one of them, and he had a very, very big crowd. But outside the convention center, likely to be a little bit of a different scene because several groups are planning protests tonight. We're told that as many as 10,000 people could be in the area outside the convention center. Some people upset with his comments about Charlottesville, his reaction to it. Some people upset about his immigration policies. Other people upset about the fact that he told Fox News he may be considering pardoning Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was recently convicted of criminal contempt of court. Phoenix's Democratic mayor, Doug Stanton, in fact, wrote an editorial in the Washington Post on Monday urging the president to stay away from Phoenix, saying it's just too soon after the Charlottesville incident to hold a rally in Phoenix, also complaining about his possible pardon of Arpaio. Listen here.
That was such a difficult situation, not only for the people in Charlottesville, but for all Americans. And so the campaign-style rally so shortly thereafter, I did not think was appropriate. Obviously, there was also talk about presidential pardons that I thought was particularly inappropriate to do so in an environment like a political rally.
But Stanton is urging the protest groups to keep it peaceful. Listen here.
We want to give you every opportunity to express your First Amendment rights, no matter what your opinion happens to be. However, as mayor of the city of Phoenix, I am expecting you to be civil, respectful, and peaceful.
In addition to the rally in Phoenix tonight, the president will first visit Yuma, Arizona. He's going to go to the Border Patrol station there to review some new equipment. He'll likely also, at some point today, renew his push for construction of the border wall. There's some 63 miles of it in the Yuma area, and apprehensions down there are down some 82%. He's also going to visit Marines at the Marine base Yuma there. As for what he will say tonight in the speech, we got a preview earlier today from Vice President Mike Pence, who will introduce the president tonight. Listen here.
I think tonight you'll hear the president say that as the Congress prepares to come back, here's the agenda. We want to support our troops. We want to provide the resources they need to accomplish the mission that the president has now tasked them to accomplish. We want to support law enforcement. We want to build a wall and have internal enforcement and border security.
So why did the president choose to do a campaign-style rally in Phoenix? Well, don't forget it was Senator John McCain who came back from brain surgery to torpedo the health care vote. And the president, as you mentioned, Melissa, has taken on Senator Jeff Flake's re-election, saying that he's weak on things like immigration. Neither McCain nor Flake will be there tonight, though I would expect they will play a prominent role as well. The governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey, will not be there tonight, though he is meeting the president on the tarmac at Phoenix to give him an Arizona welcome. Melissa?
Well, there you go. John, thank you. Turning back to the war in Afghanistan, President Trump last night making a new vow to no more nation building, I should say.
That's right. The president says it's now up to the Afghan people to choose their own path forward. Listen.
America will continue its support for the Afghan government and the Afghan military as they confront the Taliban in the field. Ultimately, it is up to the people of Afghanistan to take ownership of their future, to govern their society, and to achieve an everlasting peace. We are a partner and a friend, but we will not dictate to the Afghan people how to live or how to govern their own complex society. We are not nation building again. We are killing terrorists.
Joining us now, Kimberly Atkins, chief Washington reporter for the Boston Herald, and Kelly Jane Torrance, deputy managing editor for the Weekly Standard. Kelly Jane, the president also went on to say that a rapid exit from Afghanistan would bring results that are predictable and unacceptable. This is the same guy who, as candidate, said, let's pull out of Afghanistan. How do you explain that?
You know, he kind of eloquently, in a rare moment for President Trump, explained it himself by noting that decisions are a lot harder to make once you're behind that desk at the Oval Office. And of course, it's easy for people to, read a few headlines and think they know about what's going on in Afghanistan and the region. But once you get into the office and you start listening to your generals, to your advisors, and finding out just how complicated the situation is there, things change. And I have to say that sound clip you just played was excellent. I mean, that's exactly what we should be doing in Afghanistan. If only President Trump had not pretty much contradicted himself elsewhere in the speech. He talked about sitting down at the table, eventually negotiating peace with the Taliban. Well, how do you negotiate with terrorists? And if you want the Afghan people to be in control of their country, do the Afghan people want to be ruled by the Taliban? This is one of the most repressive groups we have ever seen in the world. They won't let women get educated. They won't. I mean, it's quite outrageous to think that we want the Afghan people to take control of their country, but that we are considering helping hand over their country to, really thuggish fundamentalists.
And Kimberly, I did think that when he mentioned a couple of benchmarks, he mentioned that, girls are going to school now in Afghanistan and life expectancy is up. He seemed to be saying, look, we are succeeding there after 16 long years.
Yes, I mean, I think that reflected the fact that the president was clearly listening to his generals now, and it was his generals who tried to convince him that Afghanistan is not a place that's just, doomed to fail, and there's nothing that the United States can do to try to help convince him that we should keep a presence there. And I think that influence was clear in this speech. But in terms of the details, I mean, the reaction that I got talking to some Republicans is while they're happy that the president does not want to put a specific timetable, it's one of the biggest criticisms of Obama's policy, they wanted more details. They're still unsure about what victory actually looks like. Yes, killing terrorists is great, but that's not a clear enough benchmark to really understand where we're going, especially at a time where we're committing more troops to Afghanistan.
He talked about a South Asia policy, Kelly Jane. He mentioned India and Pakistan, but he didn't say anything about Iran. You have some thoughts on that?
I do, John, and I'm glad you brought this up. Yeah, I think it's great that he realizes that the situation in Afghanistan is you have to look at the broader region, and he called out the eastern and southern neighbors and nearby countries, India and Pakistan, as you mentioned, but he didn't mention Afghanistan's direct western neighbor, Iran. Now, Iran is directly helping the Taliban. They actually are letting members of the Taliban commanders live in Iran and go back and forth. They are giving them money. They are giving them weapons. Iran is loving the idea of causing more chaos to Afghanistan, particularly because they see it as a way to hit at the U.S. And so I'm a little disappointed, to say the least, that Trump realizes that Pakistan needs to stop helping terrorists in that country, but he didn't mention Iran. And the president seems to want to tear up the Iran nuclear deal, and it's that deal that has made it possible for Iran to have more money in terms of direct money we gave them, and in the business deals it's allowed. And that money is not used to help the Iranian people. It is being used to fund terrorism, and part of that is caused by the Taliban.
Kimberly, the changes in the rules of engagement, well, they got some attention, but that is potentially going to be huge. I mean, I've spoken to special operators, former special operators, who say that, while they were over there, that they would know where the bad guys are. They just weren't allowed to go get them under the rules of engagement issued by the previous administration.
Yes, and this is something that is quite in line with what the president has said before, the fact that he wants to empower his military, empower the people on the ground to be able to make more decisions. That is a big deal. As you point out, there is some concern that without these rules of engagement, that it will be less control over exactly what is going on with the military, that the idea that you do have civilian control of the military. But this is right in line with the president's campaign promises about how he would deal with terrorism.
Kimberly Atkins, Boston Herald, and Kelly Jane Torrance from the Weekly Standard. Thank you both.
Thanks, John.
My pleasure.
North Korea vowing retaliation against the U.S. as payback for American military drills with South Korea. How U.S. military leaders are responding to the threats. Plus, an Ohio man opening fire on a judge outside a courthouse. The quick thinking that saved the judge's life, and the suspect's ties to a case that gained nationwide attention a few years ago.
The judge is shot right at the courthouse, and it's frustrating when I see this man get right up on a judge, and after he shoots him, he shoves the judge on the ground. That's very frustrating.
An Ohio judge is recovering this morning after he was shot and wounded outside the courthouse yesterday.
Police call it an ambush attack by the suspect, who was shot and killed by a probation officer. Mike Tobin is live in Chicago with more on what happened at the scene. Mike.
Well, Melissa, the good news is that the judge is out of surgery, and the information we have is that he will recover. But it was just after 7 a.m. yesterday morning when Judge Joseph Brucesi arrived at the courthouse in Steubenville. He was ambushed. It turned into a firefight because Judge Brucesi was armed, as was a probation officer with whom he had just been to breakfast. The sheriff believes it was the probation officer who shot and killed the attacker, but they were both armed, both of them able to return fire.
With all the nuts running around, I encouraged him to get a weapon, and he did. And another judge that was on the bench, I give him a gun to carry with him, because we have nutcases running around the city of Steubenville and the country.
Now, the shocker here is the identity of the shooter. He's Nathaniel Richmond, the father of Malik Richmond, one of the Steubenville high school football stars convicted of raping a girl at an alcohol-fueled party back in 2012. Malik served a 10-month sentence in a juvenile facility, but the case followed him to college. He'd been trying to play on the Youngstown State football team.